may not realize it, but there's someone in your life right now who is quietly changing everything. You don't see them posting about it. You don't see the countdown. No big things coming. No teaser. No stay tuned. They just disappeared for a while. And then one day, something's different about them. A new business, a new body, a new life. And your first thought isn't even congratulations. It's, when did that happen? That's not an accident. That's a pattern. And once you see it, you'll start noticing it everywhere. Let's start with something most people get completely wrong. They think the quiet ones are quiet because they're shy or private or just don't use social media like that. But that's not it. The silence is intentional. And there's a psychological reason it works that most people will never understand. Here's what actually happens in your brain the moment you tell someone your goal. Your mind, without your permission, treats the announcement like the achievement. The conversation felt real. The reaction felt real. The excitement in their eyes felt real. So your brain releases dopamine, the same chemical you'd get from actually doing the thing. And here's the problem with that. Once your brain gets the reward, the urgency to earn it quietly disappears. You felt this before. You know exactly what I'm talking about. You had the idea. You told your friend about it. You explained the whole plan. They said they loved it. You felt that rush, that this is really happening feeling. And then a week goes by, then two. And somehow that thing you were so sure about just never started. You told yourself you got busy. You told yourself the timing wasn't right. But the truth is, your brain already cashed the check. Psychologists call this a social reality. When you share a goal publicly, your identity starts to shift before you've done any real work. You start to feel like the person who did it without becoming them. And that gap between who you feel like and who you actually are, that's where goals go to die. But here's the part that gets dark, and this is something nobody will say to your face. Some people announce, not because they're excited, but because they're afraid. If they tell everyone they're starting a business and it doesn't work, at least there were witnesses to the attempt. The announcement becomes a safety net, proof that they tried, proof that they had the idea, even if nothing ever came from it. The quiet ones don't need that net. They've already made peace with failure in private, which is exactly why they fail less. Now here's what nobody tells you. Momentum is the most fragile thing in the early stage of anything. We talk about momentum like it's powerful, and it is once it builds. But at the start, it's almost nothing. It's barely a spark. And attention, even good attention, can extinguish it. Think about the last time you were working on something, and someone asked about it before it was ready. How's that going? Have you started yet? When's it launching? Suddenly, you're managing their expectations instead of doing the work. You're explaining where you are instead of moving forward. You're performing progress instead of making it. That's the trap. And most people walk right into it because it feels good to be asked. It feels good to have people watching. It feels good to matter to someone's curiosity. But the people who actually finish, they protect that early stage like it's the most important thing in the world, because it is. Let me tell you something about the quiet ones that might surprise you. They're not cold. They're not antisocial. They're not above sharing. In fact, most of them are some of the most passionate people you'll ever meet. But they've learned something through pain. They've announced before. They've felt the rush. They've watched the momentum die. They've had to explain why something didn't happen. And they decided never again. So they go internal. The energy that used to go into telling people now goes into building. The time that used to go into crafting the perfect caption now goes into the work. And something interesting happens when no one's watching. There's nothing to perform for, so you stop performing and you start becoming. There's a concept in psychology called implementation intention. Basically, when you get specific and private about a goal, your brain treats it differently. It starts building neural pathways. It starts scanning the environment for opportunities. It starts working for you, even when you're not consciously thinking about it. But that process gets disrupted the moment the goal becomes social, because now your brain has a new job, managing how other people perceive you. And that job takes up more space than you think. Here's where it gets really interesting. The people who win quietly don't just avoid announcing. They avoid consuming other people's announcements too. They're not watching the highlight reels. They're not tracking who got funded. They're not refreshing feeds to see who leveled up, because they know something the rest of us forget. Every minute you spend watching someone else's victory lap is a minute your own brain spent in the wrong direction. You've done this. You open the app, you see someone's win, and for a split second, even if you're happy for them, there's this quiet voice. Why not me? What am I doing wrong? Am I behind? And now your emotional energy is pointed at their story, not yours. The quiet ones protect their attention the same way they protect their goals, not because they're bitter, not because they don't celebrate others, but because they understand that focus is finite, and where it goes is where your life goes. Now let's talk about the moment, because there is always a moment, the reveal, the result. The day the quiet one shows up completely transformed. And here's what makes that moment different from every loud announcement you've ever seen. Nobody can argue with it. Nobody can minimize it. Nobody can say, well, let's see if it lasts, because it's already done. The result is standing right there. Announcements invite opinions. Results invite silence. And in that silence is the most powerful thing a person can feel. Undeniable proof. You might be sitting with something right now, an idea, a plan, a change you've been thinking about for months. And the urge to tell someone is real. I'm not saying it isn't. The urge to share is human. The urge to be seen is human. But ask yourself this: do you want to be seen trying? Or do you want to be seen having done it? Because those are two very different experiences. One eats an audience from the beginning. The other builds one through the result. The next thing you're working on, and you know what it is. Say nothing. Not yet. Go quiet. Protect the spark. Let it build into something they can't ignore. Let the silence do what the announcements never could. You're not behind. You're not broken. You're not too late. You just finally understand why the quiet ones always seem to come out of nowhere. They were never nowhere. They were just working.